to the state of the utility and 2023 strategic goals report.
So, President McCrae, commissioners, staff, members of the public, joining me up here for the audio record, this is Frank Lawson, the CEO and General Manager. Joining me is Rod Price, Assistant General Manager, and Deborah Hart, Assistant General Manager and our CFO. Wanted to open with a few comments before we dive into some of the specifics of the results from 2023, just to set the tone this evening. At a time of turbulence and political polarization, I'm proud to work for an organization that places high regard not just on what we do, but how we do it. We attempt to operate in a manner consistent with our values of safety, reliability, affordability, environmental stewardship, respecting our community and our culture. That starts with you, commissioners, and we thank you for your service and your respectful way of providing guidance and oversight. EWEB is a strong organization because of our people, past and present, including boards and staff, who have had the foresight to make prudent decisions and investments on behalf of our customers and our community. We are a confident organization, one that has the conviction to make and see through tough decisions, working for the collective good of our community at large, while also recognizing the need to acknowledge and learn from our mistakes, be more dynamic and nimble, looking for opportunities to continuously improve. For example, EWEB completed 57 continuous improvement projects in 2023, not to mention and including the EWEB Enterprise Solutions, EES project, that in itself is a continuous improvement and modernization program. As for a few highlights from 2023, over the past year, we codified our commitment to resiliency, including the ability to mitigate the impacts of disruptive events through our planning, investments, response, and recovery. We didn't know that was going to be tested so soon, a couple of weeks ago. Being resilient isn't just about infrastructure. It's also about money. It's about workforce. It's about information and the resiliency of our decisions. Resiliency is becoming a one EWEB rallying cry and part of our everyday thinking. From a workforce perspective, I'd like to thank the team, including the IBEW leadership, union membership, and members of the EWEB bargaining team who completed a new collective bargaining agreement in 2023. Another highlight of 2023 was a commitment to and a recognition of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our success. Up front, the policy directly states why this commitment is important, highlighting the benefits necessary to effectively fulfill our mission. EWEB has challenges, increasing risks from climate and a hard to navigate regulatory environment, aging infrastructure, supply constraints, and at times scarcity, changing energy markets, cyber and physical threats, inflationary pressures on materials and contractors, and a tight labor market are just a few. But with challenge comes opportunity, and the people of EWEB are poised to continue to fulfill our mission, whatever the environment, with intent and purpose. Navigating the tension between focus and scale that comes from being a little big utility with lots of complexity and lots of choices. Communications are critical to how EWEB operates. I can't express more my gratitude to our communications department for their growth and success in 2023. From communicating the complexities of an integrated resource planning process, to the Lieberg decommissioning decision, to East 40th, to College Hill, to rate increases, and to internal communications, to the list goes on. Sometimes we self-create problems for them as well. The quantity and quality of their outreach achieved a new level in 2023. EWEB has two drivers of our culture. One for those who fulfill our daily mission, keeping the flow of drinking water, electrons, money, and information. And another for those who are committed to ensuring that we can continue to provide these services next week, next month, next year, 20 years from now, all while navigating the multitudes of threats and changes of which we are presented. Commissioners, I'd like to close by thanking all of you and all of the EWEB staff for how you conduct yourselves. You are fostering a culture of intentional actions and outcomes, continuous improvement, and diverse perspectives that is respectful, equitable, and inclusive. You are all dedicated to your public service, your professions, the local governance model, and your commitment to serve our community. If I appear confident in EWEB, it is because of the people in which I have the pleasure of working. Thank you. I think now we'll get into, we'll transition to the operational results for 2023. In this report, Rod and Deborah and I, with the support of the executive team and subject matter experts, will provide more details on some of the specific noteworthy results from 2023. So that was the picture that was supposed to show. Just so you can catch up, but a lot went on, and really appreciate commissioners and staff for all of your support in 2023. Rod, ready to continue?
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's a lot of stuff in this report, and I think it's always a challenge to how do you present this kind of information and have it sound fresh and different. There's a lot of details going on. So we talked a little bit about the presentation, and so Deb and I are going to talk about the goal number one, basically, and how we're going to talk about it is through the values. You know, the mission at EWEB is to deliver drinking water and electricity for the vitality of our community per our values, right? So we're going to, at least what I'm going to do is highlight some things through those values and hopefully just catch a few of the things that Frank did not catch. So one of the big values we have is safety. And it used to be safety was thought about as, you know, your physical safety. And that's still a huge part of what we do in our company and our culture is take care of people's safety. And so we have some external markers that tell us how we're doing in that. So the OSHA DART award, for instance, we're at really basically our all-time low for the DART measurement. So there's more about that in the report. But we also get some recognition from our insurance carriers like SAFE. We also get awards from EWEB and APPA for recognizing the holistic safety picture is what we do now. It's not just the physical safety, it's the mental piece and the engagement and these things that are important across the board. So just as an illustration of that, in May coming up is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so last year, EWEB initiated a program, an awareness program through Workforce Services to bring messaging out to the employees about mental health. And so what to do, what to recognize, and how if you're feeling mental health stress and issues. So one of the things we did notice in 2023, the EAP or assistance counseling utilization went almost double from. So whether it's directly related to that outreach or whatever, I'm not sure, but I think that's a good example of some of the benefits we apply to our marketplace. So besides just our physical safety, generally we do have some physical security programs and activities that help keep employees safe and our public safe too out in the field. Cyber is another area which you may not normally think of as safety, but there's another program where I have mixed metrics down here. Our internal operations programs are very effective and things. We've got some external audits and some kind of things that say maybe we have some gaps, and so there's some areas of opportunity to work on. The pictures, what I really wanted to illustrate there is we had a great event, the Health and Wellness Safety event last September. Those were a couple pictures from it. That event brought a lot of these things that I'm talking about together, physical, all kinds of light and balance kind of things together in one room. So I hope to see you at that next safety event, because it really is a good nexus for what we think about safety. Reliability is another big thing, right? We wouldn't be here if we weren't reliable. So Karen talked a little bit about this, the source to tap kind of the model, and she's brought this in and expanded it to electric as well. So we talk about reliability, and we normally think about reliability as you know, how does our customer receive our product, and how do they get services, and some of those things. And so I just tried to pull out some of the things from the report that illustrate, you know, we are very responsive in outages. We're beating national averages. Can't really compare these water and electric. It's not apples to apples, the stats and the metrics and those kind of things, but they both are illustrating. For instance, if we had 96 outages, 80 outage durations, that means people are responding and fixing their problems on average in 84 minutes. The national average is 112. Electric's the same way. We're doing really well there, and so we're working on our response time to customer service requests. And so and again, I'm sorry, they're not apples to apples, because it looks a lot different the 1 week to 6 weeks with the design queues, for instance. But we're meeting and beating our targets in the folks utilities. I think one of the things when we talk about reliability, we do think about the customer. And so the people that aren't maybe directly involved in the source to tap, what I want to say is don't forget this utility by accident. We're all here to support the reliability and product delivery in one way or another now or into the future. Frank mentioned that and talked about resilience. So there's a lot of things going on. We want to be reliable and to our customers unless we're reliable to ourselves. And I think this, if you look through the quarterly report and the year-end reports, you'll see lots and lots of information that tells us how good we are doing for ourselves. And I just picked a couple departments, CSAs, for instance, just the work that they've done over the last 3 or 4 years in improving how they answer calls, and the methods they do, and adding FTE and all the things that they're doing. You know, if you want, the report kind of shows the historical improvements over time. Fleet's another one. This not necessarily some of the stuff wasn't in the report, but we can't do anything about vehicles, right? We have 263 vehicles, but nothing happens without vehicles. And it's just a good illustration that they're so good at what they do. I mean, 183 million gallons of fuel. It's crazy. Most of that's biofuel too, so we can get into that a little bit. But I just want to say, kind of like Frank, a good shout out to everybody. All here for a reason. Everybody's doing good work. Last one I'll touch on is environmental. Our values around preserving our watershed, which we heard a lot about. That's off to that program. Our role in reducing greenhouse gases. We last year completed a climate guidebook. It's already in Rev 2 process right now. So that's another really a very useful and helpful document. It's a great reference. I use it. Just another example of the environmental product line. We had 163 solar projects, and sometimes we hear we don't do solar projects, but we've done a lot of them. We're spending 1.5 times the amount on EVs this year that we did the previous years. Our fleet reduced its greenhouse gas emissions in 2023 by 1,300 metric tons. Even down to the what I thought was really interesting, the Hayden Bridge talks about they've increased their efficiencies to reduce their carbon footprint. What I thought was really interesting was the leak detection highlights. 162 million gallons of water was saved through the leak detection program. So that's just, some of the benefits of the smart meters on the water side. You convert that to cash, that's roughly $500,000 from a perspective. Don't quote me on that because it's a funny money kind of thing anyway. But it just gives you some perspective on how much water that is and how much that's saving customers and how much that's reducing impact. So the energy efficiency programs, 107% of our target, 14.3 megawatt hours total saved. So that's great news. These programs are effective, doing well. So those are just some of the examples, and I'm going to turn it over for to talk about money, of course.
Usually they don't let me run this, so bear with me. So while the results are still preliminary, our annual audit is underway and those final results will come to you next month at our April board meeting. Both utilities did finish the year with a solid performance. The electric utility had favorable net income to budget, as did the water utility. Reserves are strong for both utilities. With the exception of rate of return, all metrics are within board target. The rate of return on electric was due to the poor water year that really significantly lowered wholesale revenues. The water one, though, is a really good story in that we had a bunch of our expenses, which do show up in the rate of return, offset by grant income that does not. So bringing in grant income, while the metric came down outside of our target, was actually a good story about our ability to save our ratepayers money. The electric utility stayed within its O&M and capital budget authority. The water utility was within for O&M, and in December, the board did approve a capital budget amendment that was driven by a combination of things, including some timing and then some price pressure. Both utilities really are experiencing rate pressure, and that's being driven by things like increasing regulation, ongoing supply chain issues, the significant investments that each utility is making in its infrastructure, and that inflation did not cool as fast as the Fed had hoped for or had forecasted, really. There were rate increases that we did implement in 2023 and an average 3.25 for electric and 6 for water. Even with those rate increases, though, EWEB is near the bottom of its comparators for the water utility and in the middle of the pack for electric. And as we look back to 2017, which is when we first started calculating the utility burden, our utility burden has fallen from 4.6% to 3.48%. And that really is coming from working to control costs because our local income is not, it really lags behind our comparator communities. So there are many noteworthy things going on in our community and culture, and I just want to call out a few. I should have probably read what Frank was going to say because now I might duplicate him. But one of the highlights for me really was the number of continuous improvement projects that we completed in support of our goals around operational effectiveness, workforce and culture, and particularly EES. And EWEB supports the community in many ways, which you'll see the whole list in attachment G of your report. But we have outstanding loan balances of about $6 million that have helped our customer owners fund energy efficiency, conservation, and resiliency. And impressively, And we paid off no loans last year. So it's not right off. We delivered approximately $3.5 million in customer assistance through the various programs that you see up there. And we've offered grants for things like community education and mobility, just to name a few. Our electric utility supported PG&E and PGE with mutual aid, and the water utility got in on the mutual aid action as well this year, supporting last year, 2023, supporting Mapleton.
Hey, Deborah. So specifically, we've gone through and identified the areas of the goals that you all assign us and approve at the beginning of the year. And we're really in a process of trying to operationalize those further. Felt like we overall, the goal accomplishment was very good. There are a few areas where we didn't feel like we made as much progress as we would have liked. So those you see in yellow, the light green is basically they were on track. We felt like we are where we are. And then if an item is dark green, that's where we felt like that's completed. And now we can move on to something else. And an example of that was the collective bargaining agreement that was signed March of last year. Rod and Deborah just highlighted a little bit about goal number 1, which is operational effectiveness. The first 2 goals are really about establishing the fundamentals of an organization. If you are not operating very well day to day, it is really hard to work on strategic items. So these 2 goals really are intended to build a foundation and give us the ability and the right, quite honestly, to pursue more strategic endeavors. Really appreciate the board's participation in the DEI work this last year as one of the examples that fell into workforce and culture. We did do an employee engagement survey at the beginning of the year, but identified a number of different action items, highlighted where we feel like our employees are engaged and where we have opportunities to continue to improve. We just, that was the first one we'd done in a long time. And so at one point does not make a trend. And so we just completed another version of that same survey and are just now getting the results. So we'll have more information on that going forward. The other goals, the EWEB enterprise solution, that's our integrated IT system, starting with the customer information system and the finance systems. Those were the goals for 2023 are on track. A number of significant amount of process work. We're minimizing customizations. We've made hundreds of decisions, documented over 100 different processes that are part of our customer interaction, how we do our accounting. We are seeing this year a little bit of schedule pressure that we're mitigating as we move from the design phase into the actual implementation phase. The integrated resource plan, the 2023 plan was completed. There was a significant amount of outreach to the community throughout the first half of last year. We didn't do it like we did in 2011, where we had a very sort of elitely selected group. We actually went out broader than we had in 2011. Many of you were part of different presentations that were given to different organizations. Some of them very specifically to certain groups, some of them more general. Did a lot of outreach in the first half of the year. And that concluded with the board endorsing the action plan, approving the action plan portion of that, and acknowledging and recognizing the analytical work that supported that. Continue to make progress on the design and land use and permitting process as part of the second drinking water source. We are just now learned a little bit more emphasis on the public facility services plan starting up, being funded again through our city partners. So we'll expect to see a lot of progress on that in preparation for the construction years down the road. The Lieberg hydroelectric decommissioning plan, board was very involved in that decision previous year. Then the development and check-ins on the actual action plan, or as they refer to it, the plan of the plan, highlighting the various schedules and events and opportunities for the board's role going forward. And so overall, if you look at the goals, there were 20 goals, including all the sub goals. We feel like we fully accomplished 16 of the 20 and made progress on the remaining sub goals that were characterized here. I also wanted to acknowledge in 2023 the important role that you all play in providing guidance and direction for the organization. Really appreciate the leadership of President Carlson, former President Carlson, Vice President Borofsky last year. A number of significant decisions and guidance was provided to specific policy developments and approvals, and then oversight and direction on just a whole slew of plethora of items that you get to have a routine interaction on, including some things like a PURPA hearings process, which that may be Brian Booth's favorite subject. It is definitely not the rest of our favorite subject. Something that hadn't been updated in about 2 decades, and ultimately adopting and saying that the PURPA revisions were appropriate under certain conditions for EWEB to pursue. So thank you for your policy work, your guidance, and your direction in 2023, including a number of things that will now continue into 2024. So with that, really want to thank staff, thank the board. I felt like 2023 was a very successful year for the organization. It's not that all the decisions we made were agreed to by everybody, but I can say firsthand that past boards, and in particular this board, takes a lot of consideration and looks at decisions very thoroughly, and researches decisions, works with staff to develop an understanding of using a triple bottom line approach where necessary, and makes decisions based on what's good for the community overall. And we really appreciate that guidance. And so with that, President McCray, I'll turn it back to you if commissioners have comments or questions. We do have a number of the executive team present, and as well as staff if you have questions that Rod or Deborah can't handle.
Comments, questions?
Just a couple questions and then a comment. So, of those 1.3 million miles and 183 million gallons, is that 1 year? Then on the loans, on the zero write-offs, when we do a loan, do they repay us like through their bill? Is that how it's done? Okay, that's probably help.
That,
Very good.
that helps.
Yes, I was gonna
Without
say.
a doubt, but 0 is still really good because people move out.
Oh, yeah.
Leave
No,
and-
I was just, I saw zero false, and I was wondering if
Fair
that,
point.
if that was the mechanism, that if you don't pay it, there's other consequences like that. And I guess the last thing that I would like to say is a question. The question is there anything else that you would need from this board? Help you maintain or achieve the goals that are up there, either the yellow ones, the green ones, or whatever. Is there anything that this board can give to you that you can articulate that would help move the needle?
I don't think from a board, when I look at where we made progress, where we didn't make progress, some of that is just simply around the trade-offs between focus and making choices. I feel like this board provides really good direction when it comes to the major priorities of the organization. And some of that is through our regular goal development process. We started it earlier this year. We will probably start it even earlier for next year. But I don't feel like we were lacking in support or guidance or direction from the board.
That's good. I just, it's a question that I've asked to other boards and staffs. It's like, is there something that you need that we're not giving you, either direction wise, financially wise, or whatever? If there is,
I think a pre-ask, Commissioner Borowski, if we do get into a situation where we feel like there are major trade-offs between the prioritization or conflicts, either there's always tension, the Rod and Deborah went through the values, but there is often tension between those values. And there's times when we may come to the board for guidance if there's, for example, there's tension between reliability and affordability. We could have perfect reliability at a cost, but we have to be able to balance those, and the board is significantly helping us to balance those. If we are, the pre-ask is if we get in a situation where we're finding a major tension between resources to fulfill some goals that we've identified as priorities for the organization, we will come to the board and identify that as a conflict or as an issue that we need to resolve. We won't just come to the board and say it's a problem. We will come to the board with potential solutions that we would like guidance on. So that's a pre-ask, not that I'm expecting to do that anytime in the near future, but I do think that that's part of the role of the board. We want to have goals that are not easy to achieve. We want to stretch ourselves as an organization, but we don't want to create too many goals to where we're losing the focus of the organization. And so there will be times that we have to balance that.
Thank you for all the work to put this together. I just had a couple of quick questions on some of the metrics that were shown. 6.6 weeks to approve on the electric side. I think it was slide like 9. I'm just curious when we're talking about that, that's like a permitting process for a new hookup. Is that correct? Or what does the 6.6 weeks really represent?
That was basically so if you think about somebody calls and they want something to the time they get it, you go through a process. So the first part is the design time, which is what that represents.
When you say something that is getting
A new electric service, rewire, almost anything. Subdivision, building renovations.
I'm just curious if there are anything, I understand that we're, below other metrics, then why not? If there are any things that we can do, given that we have a housing crisis, to help move that
Yeah.
along further, is it just a matter of like the amount of staff that it takes to bring that number down? Or are there other steps that we have to take that have like, we have to wait 3 weeks here and then we have to wait for another thing 3 weeks here? I'm just curious if at some point we could maybe get some more information if others are supportive of that. Because I'd like to figure out if there's something else we can do to help get hookups done so we can get housing active. That's like the one place where we touch it, so.
We can take a deeper dive into that. There, as part of the process, there's customer wait time as well included in that. So typically we will do an estimate. The customer has to decide whether the project moves forward. There's a design queue, there's a construction crew queue. And so this is the accumulation of all of that. We did have some staffing challenges mid-year in the group that did that work. I think there's been some hiring in that area. So there is some that is resource directly related to resource, but we can certainly take a deeper dive into what that queue process looks like.
Yeah, I fully understand, things that are outside of that number. That's why I asked what the kind of the breakdown was of. There's things that are in our control, there's things that are outside of our control. Just get a little bit, appreciate it. On slide 30, 41.6% reduction in the fleet.
Just moves on itself.
Fleet GHG emissions reduction. 41.6%. Oh my goodness, what are they doing?
Actually, I think I probably misquoted that. I think, I'll have to get back, but it's not that they're reducing, it's the roughly half.
Oh, the fuel itself is, okay. Anyway, if you could clarify that, I'm just curious. I mean, I would like to know what they're able to do. I know that we have a very, progressive fleet. They're always looking for ways to do better, and that seems like a remarkable.
They had a 23 goal, I believe, and so that's part of what that is to getting down below a certain level.
Commissioner Carlson, the upcoming update to the climate guidebook will include where we're at with some of our annual reporting of GHG emissions. And so that'll be part of that process.
Okay. And then on the slide where we were talking, we always look at these converters between, our rates and the other utilities. And one thing that occurred to me, I'm just curious, do we have any data or can we find it on the other utilities and how carbon intensive they are? Because I do wonder, as we're looking at, we have a goal to hit 95% carbon free. Are we comparing apples to apples in here? We already have a very clean, and many of them also buy from BPA, so some of that's the same, but we have done other things to kind of go above and beyond. And I'm curious how that mix looks.
Yeah, all of the utilities in Oregon supply information through the DEQ. That is then published on the Oregon Department of Energy. They have a carbon intensity page, and we can send you that link. You look up City of Ashland, you can look up us, you can look up Pacific Corp. Most of the Bonneville-based customers are similar to us. Sometimes we're a little bit better because we have some of our own resources, which diminishes our need for just market purchases. Pacific Corp will tend to be much higher. PGE is higher in their carbon intensity than EWEB. The one thing about this as well is just this year, for example, some of these utilities have increased on the electric side, increased their rates by double digits. For example, last year, Pacific Corp raised their rates 23%. They put in to raise them another 16% this year. That's significant year over year. And Portland General Electric just recently raised their rates 17%. And so there is significant upward pressure on in particular electric utilities, but it's not unique to electric utilities because of a number of the risks that we're mitigating, including wildfire risks and some of the other things, we have very unique supplies. The equipment that we have is raw materials intense. And so we're all feeling that, but I think EWEB has done a good job of our staying within our budgetary limits and trying to limit our rate increases to as close to a normal inflationary number as we can, unless there's some specific.
I wish there was a way to even measure resiliency, because I know that we've done a lot of work to make sure that our system is more resilient to these different shocks. I don't know if we have access to any of those kind of data. No, what's the acronym for it? The
SCADA system.
Yeah, of some of the other utilities of, like, days out of service, when they do get those same shocks. Are they less able to deal with them? Like, we were able to keep our water system running because we've made some of those investments. That doesn't get reflected in these dollars very easily because it's just one dollar figure, but it is a real impact to the community when we have those shocks, and we've put investments in, cost, then cost the community less when we do have those shocks. Anyway, thank you very much for the hard work, and I'll look forward to hearing.
I don't know, Commissioner Carlson, Rod Price be able to weigh into this. On the electric side of the utility, some of the standardized metrics, which are based on the Institute of Electrical Electronic Engineers, IEEE standards, some of those measurements exclude major events because they're looking for long-term trends. But I don't know, there may be some that actually include, because a long-term event would just drown out your base business. But I don't know if some actually do. We could see if there's any baselines for that.
I mean, we often say that the cost to us is insignificant, compared to the amount of cost that it costs the community when we have a major power outage. You lose an entire grocery store worth of food. A business is out of power for 5 days. Those are real economic impacts that aren't easily quantifiable in here.
That's correct.
And quick question, ever since COVID, we've been using this term about supply chain issues and being an impediment to meeting our goal. So what is your crystal ball, or what is your position on, I see we just got delayed again on EMI water in 2025 because of supply chain issues. Are you anticipating that phenomenon to continue even into the future? Or how are you planning on dealing with that with your planning?
Well, he had a crystal ball.
I do have an answer for that. I think is, all this. I mean, basically the pivot is to the global economy to more of a North American economy, right? So from my perspective, and Deb probably has a different point of view on it, but you can see manufacturers pivoting to more local supplies. What I really see is the price is not coming down. The pricing is pretty impactful. The price of hamburger is not the only thing that's gone up, and so we were looking at a small short jaunt of transmission line that was $1 million. Now it's $4 million. That was only 2 or 3 years ago. So between labor and the price of materials, all that's gone up a lot. I do see the materials though not being as much of an issue. Although again, this room, we were supposed to have it ready for prime time, with our new AV systems is a victim of that too. So there are still hiccups on electronics and some of those.
I'd also add that operations has been working closely with the procurement group to identify supply needs so that we don't end up with last minute orders where we do have more issue, and to make sure that we've really identified what supplies we need and whether or not there are alternatives that are equally satisfactory to get the job done. So there's been some work in that area as well.
I would say just anecdotally too, that you asked about comparisons to other utilities. We're doing in that ice storm. We started helping people with materials, so as opposed to taking, so we're doing a lot of things to be resilient. I think that's starting to pay off.
And I'm just worried about upward pressure on rates and our 5 and 10-year capital plans. And when we were using 3 and 4% inflation, and now your example, you just gave $1 million went to $4 million. That's a lot more than 10%, and that's just standard stuff. So just, you know, bringing up the point, I don't envy you to have to try and balance that. Keep going, but I just supply chain issue.
I do think that there will continue to be upward pressure on those things that influence our rates. Supply chain is a piece of that. I see that continuing for a number of years, and I think we're going to have to take a look at how we do our capital planning and look at more of a scope-based capital plan as opposed to a monetary-based capital plan, and see if we maintain that scope, what's the monetary impact going forward. It's a little bit different way of looking at it. And so I suspect that will continue for a number of years. If in most businesses, inventory is evil, it's sort of considered a waste. I think in this industry where, to Commissioner Carlson's point, the cost of disruptions far outweighs the lost revenue for our organization. The cost on the community is magnitudes more. That inventory, because of the standards that we have to adhere to, is viewed much differently, and we'll continue to view that differently going forward. It's not evil in our case, and in fact, it's beneficial.
Thank you.
I think it's fantastic how many of our that were either on target or achieved. So that's great. I have a question about the dynamic workforce model. I know you've talked about this a little bit, but in the past few years, we heard about how hard it was to hire for positions, and we had to have consultants. We had to go out and pay more for consultants to keep them hiring internally. And I'm just curious if you're seeing a change in that trend.
No, go ahead.
So specifically, we called it the dynamic workforce model because we didn't want to call it telecommuting. We wanted it to be something that we could evolve over time depending on industry trends, workforce trends. We are seeing in some industries, ours included, that organizations recognize the benefit of sort of in-person collaboration in some form or another. We have about 20% of our people are fully telecommuting. I think roughly 40% are some hybrid, and then 40% are field-based. And so we have a mix. The cultures that I mentioned are part of that. We're going to evaluate different ways of how we evolve that going forward. But to answer your question directly about does that help with recruiting? Yeah, in some cases it helps in recruiting, but the door swings both ways. We also have people that can reside in Eugene that can go work for an organization in Portland. So we have to view our organization to be an attractive place to work, sometimes independently of where you're actually located. And so that's part of the dynamics that we're going to have to look at going forward. We're going to have to look at how we design our workspace. We're going to have to be more flexible. Deborah Hart's work group is reorganizing their workspace to facilitate a lot of hybrid work in combination with collaborative work. And so that's what we mean by dynamic. I think we look at it. Honestly, I think COVID taught us a lot. It provided some really interesting opportunities from a technology and a workforce perspective. We've learned from that, but we have also learned that there's vulnerabilities with that. An example was during the ice storm, when we thought it's great to have people who can answer the phones remotely because they don't have to worry about traveling into a facility up until they lose power. And so we discovered a different vulnerability when 3/4 of our people during the ice storm lost power themselves. And so Rod mentioned our cybersecurity. Some of the areas that we feel like there's more work to be done is there's a lot of software as a system. We don't actually own or have the server with the software, and we need to work with our suppliers on that side of it. But that probably more than ends.
Well, and I guess to follow up or to ask an additional question, what about some of the more technical or fieldwork based positions? Because I feel like that's where we were having trouble attracting or recruiting. And has that changed at all? Or are we still in the same position?
So one of the things the dynamic workforce stuff did illustrate quite clearly in the engagement survey work we did. We've got several cultures, right? You got the field work and sort of office work, if you will, or hybrid work. But overall, we're starting to fill some of those positions, but they're still out there just as, it's still flat out a shortage, not necessarily how you work or where you work. It's just a shortage of the talent. So workforce services, Linux stuff was workforce report recommendation that will take into account all these factors we've been talking about, safety and engagement, and some of these things that, what keeps people here, what attracts people here, how can we tap into the, the people in Portland or whatever. So we're working on that, and that's part of one of the goals this year. Organizational goals. So you'll be hearing more about that as probably in a month or so when we get into the next quarter report, right?
Yeah, we've made some good progress on the hiring and recruiting front. It doesn't eliminate the fact that there are certain positions, and some of those are facility-based positions that are recruited for the specific reason that Rod mentioned, is the availability and supply and demand at play there.
Fantastic.
David Powerful. Break that.
Was that a question?
Yeah.
No, I'm trying to turn it off.
I'll just chime in very briefly and say thank you as well for the report. There's every time I have read through one of these, I'm learning something new. Is borderline ridiculous, but also fantastic. So thank you. And then I just want to say to my fellow board members just how much I appreciate working with you all. We don't always agree, but I have a tremendous respect for most of you. No, I have a tremendous respect for all of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to work together. And the same to the staff team, the team that we engage with on a regular basis, all of you who are in the room, just the level of professionalism and respectfulness is really remarkable. So really appreciate the work. And then, of course, there's hundreds of people that we don't engage with regularly, but also just want to acknowledge the remarkable work. This winter storm was just a prime example, I think, of how our team works to make things happen and to keep the lights on or get them back on as fast as possible. So I just feel really fortunate to be here, really fortunate to work with EWEB, and I'm really glad that all the hard decisions are now done. So no more hard decisions in 2024, and thank you for that.
I only heard we're going to bring you easy decisions.
Good.
Okay. So one thing we didn't mention in the report, I just wanted to call it out, was over 14,000 megawatt hours of energy efficiency work was done in 2023. That's a really significant number. Over 6,000 of those megawatt hours were in the last quarter. And so some of that is timing. Some of it is that we work with Bonneville to get some additional funding for that work. And I say funding, we fund Bonneville and they give it back. So it's not like they're paying for everything, but we're paying indirectly. But that was a really phenomenal effort at the end of the year by that team. So thank that team, Julie. Thank you. It's a pleasure to work with all of you, most of you.
I mean,
I didn't name names. Nobody named any names.
Right, the next item is the 20